On this Monday night, the lights are mostly back on in Ottawa, but the cleanup from those devastating tornadoes has only just begun. As people return to survey the destruction, why some are insisting on staying in their damaged homes, living with the reminders of that terrifying night, and how the weather could soon bring more problems.
Also tonight, Donald Trump's Supreme Court pick hits back against his accusers, this time in prime time. The president may be standing by his man, but the official overseeing the Russia investigation might not be so lucky. Will Trump say, "You're fired"? This is The National.
Just when they thought it couldn't get much worse, people who lost so much in Friday's tornadoes have even more to worry about tonight. You've already heard about the hundreds of damaged homes and businesses in the Ottawa-Gatineau area, with gaping holes in roofs, blown out windows, if they're still standing at all. But for those buildings still habitable, today the scramble was on to fix them, board them, or tarp them to prevent even more damage when days of rain begin in the morning. Our coverage has been focused on the community of Dunrobin, so tonight we're taking you to the second tornado's damage zone, the West Ottawa neighborhood of Arlington Woods. As Catherine Cullen reports, the woods there are what caused so much ruin.
Oh my goodness.
Welcome to Frank Moritz's backyard.
Now, Frank, were you home when this happened?
I was, yeah.
In just a few seconds, the tornado turned his yard, his home, and his life upside down. But Moritz and his neighbors are determined to fix it.
We have to make plans and get rebuilding.
He offers to show us the work that's already started. The first step, covering the holes in the roof.
Is there a tree nearby? No,
Well,
part of the...
it's all outside, eh?
Incredibly, the Moritzes are still living in the house, even though there's no power. If they find out the power can't safely be turned back on, they'll have a new challenge.
It might be that they would declare this house unlivable.
But you're living in it right now?
Right, but I have no power.
They just keep focused on cleaning up, though it seems like an impossibly big task.
When you think about the cleanup, what's going through your mind?
It's just too horrendous. I don't want to think about it because I think I might break, and I'm trying to stay strong and positive, so I just move it out of my mind, and very often I pray internally and ask for strength.
I can't let you any further than that, but
Others are praying too. The tornado ripped a chunk of the roof right off Arlington Woods Church.
it looked like part of that roof was just ready to come right off.
Workers are now racing to try to cover up the holes before the rain forecast for tomorrow.
Obviously, they're putting this back together again here as far as getting everything tarped in.
Pastor Mike Hugaboom says he's been going on adrenaline. Yesterday, they held the church service in the parking lot.
We're trying to put our pieces back together again while you're working along to try to help some of the folks that are hurting and grieving in this community. So it's quite a process.
Church members are both helping and being helped right now. They set up a place for neighbors to charge phones, which turned into a place to get coffee. Then came donations of food from nearby restaurants.
It's absolutely wonderful to see how the community has come together, and there's no place I'd rather be.
Even with so much work ahead. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
And that work that lies ahead isn't just on homes. Since Friday, it's been a race to repair all the hydro lines damaged by the tornadoes. At the peak of the outage, about 300,000 homes and businesses in the Ottawa-Gatineau region were without power. Now tonight, that's down to about 4,700 customers, and many of them will have electricity restored sometime overnight. Our Katie Simpson rode along today with one of the many crews working tirelessly to get the lights back on.
Hey, Rock! Hey, Rock! Everything good up there?
This is what hydro workers call hand-to-hand battle. About a dozen crew members are needed to replace these hydro poles snapped in half by a tornado and left dangling over a gas station.
When you guys rolled up here, describe to me what the scene looked like.
Okay, so when we rolled up here, first thing came to my mind is, where do I start?
Darcy Provo has been with Ottawa Hydro for 30 years. He says he's never seen destruction like this before, save for the ice storm in 1998.
As we were watching the numbers and grow and grow with the outage report, we were into something really, really big.
At the peak of the chaos, more than half of Ottawa was in the dark. But after 3 days of round-the-clock efforts and help from out-of-town hydro workers, most of the outages have been restored. And as crews finished up this intersection job, some workers headed back to one of the hardest-hit neighborhoods, where the restoration will take much longer.
The problem with this particular site is that we can't even do a damage assessment yet because there's so much debris. We don't know what's been damaged.
Joseph Muglia is a director at Ottawa Hydro. He says one thing making the difficult work a little easier is the response from the community.
So we went to Costco and buy some snack bars and Gatorade to keep everybody hydrated and they won't go hungry.
Random acts of kindness are breaking out all over the city.
You have people that their lives have been devastated by this. And what our guys have experienced is people coming out to them, bringing coffee, bringing food to them, and it's overwhelming to them.
Ottawa Hydro hopes the feelings of gratitude will last, since this cleanup is a battle that is long from being won. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Ottawa.
And one last note on Friday's storm. Tonight, Environment Canada confirmed a third tornado touchdown near the Ontario community of Calabogie. That's about 100 kilometers west of Ottawa. We are following a very tight race in New Brunswick this evening. The polls in the provincial election closed a little over 3 hours ago. CBC projects it will be a minority government, but which party will form it? Well, the race is just too close to call. It is neck and neck between Brian Gallant's Liberals and Blaine Higgs' Progressive Conservatives. Here's how things look right now. The PC's currently at 22 seats. That is just one seat ahead of the Liberals. And of course, one big storyline tonight is the third and fourth parties picking up seats. The People's Alliance with 3, and right now the Greens also with 3. Kayla Hounsell joins us now live from the Liberal Party headquarters in Grand Digue. And Kayla, we've seen the numbers. What do we know about what happens next?
Yeah, that's the big question, Ian. Everyone wants to know. As you say, we know there will be a minority government. We do not know who will form the government. We do know that the smaller parties could end up playing a very large role here in New Brunswick's next government. We know that Green Party leader David Kuhn has won his seat. We also know that the leader of the People's Alliance Party of New Brunswick, Chris Austin, has been elected in his riding. So what everyone is watching to see right now is how many more seats these parties might emerge with, and then of course who might hold the balance of power. We saw this in British Columbia last year when the Greens emerged holding the balance of power. They took their 3 seats and sided with the NDP to have an advantage over the Liberals, and then, as you know, Ian, the NDP went on to form government.
I'll bet there are even people in New Brunswick tonight who are suddenly trying to figure out what the Greens and the People Alliance stand for. Tell us about these parties.
Right. Well, the Greens have become known as sort of a one-issue party, the environment, but the New Brunswick Greens have campaigned on a wide range of issues. They have promised to hike the minimum wage and eliminate the interest on provincial student loans, just to name a couple. They would be more closely aligned with the Liberals, and the People's Alliance Party would be more closely aligned with the Progressive Conservatives. The People's Alliance really has branded itself as an alternative for the people who are maybe frustrated with the so-called traditional parties. Language is always the number one issue when the People's Alliance come to mind, and that is always an issue here in Canada's only officially bilingual province. So the People's Alliance say they're not against bilingualism, but they have campaigned on the idea that they would end the province's dual healthcare system, that is the separate healthcare systems in both official languages, and they would also get rid of the province's official languages commissioner. So it'll be interesting to see over the next couple of days what alliances might form. Here's what People's Alliance leader Chris Austin had to say just a short time ago.
As I've said before, I'm willing to work with any party that has some of the ideas that we have been pushing. You know, part of being a minority government is negotiation, it's compromise, it's working with all other parties, and that's what we've committed to do.
So a little vague there, but it'll be interesting to see again what alliances and what kind of discussions will be happening in the next couple of days, and in fact may have already started happening. Interesting to note, it has been more than 100 years since two or more parties could shift the balance of power here in New Brunswick. Ian.
Kayla Hounsel in Grand Digue, New Brunswick tonight. Thank you.
And turning now to the U.S., Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh is taking to prime time, strongly denying the sexual misconduct allegations against him.
I did not have sexual intercourse or anything close to sexual intercourse in high school or for many years thereafter.
That is part of an extraordinary interview with Brett Kavanaugh and his wife Ashley just a few hours ago, as Kavanaugh continues to deny allegations from two accusers. Christine Blasey Ford came forward last week to say Kavanaugh held her down at a high school party and tried to take her clothes off. Yesterday, Deborah Ramirez said Kavanaugh exposed himself to her at a dorm party when he was a freshman at Yale. A third woman could emerge this week, according to lawyer Michael Avenatti. He says his client, unnamed so far, has a further allegation from Kavanaugh's time in prep school. Now, the stakes are so high for both sides. If Kavanaugh does get a seat on the Supreme Court, he could tilt its decisions to the right for a generation. As the CBC's Ellen Morrow shows us, both sides are digging in for the court they want.
In the shadow of the Supreme Court, dozens marched today with one message.
We do not support putting someone accused of sexual assault and sexual misconduct on the Supreme Court to decide what happens to our lives.
Paige Kreuter, on a hunger strike since Friday, says she will not eat until Christine Blasey Ford testifies on Thursday or Brett Kavanaugh withdraws.
For those who are on the Judiciary Committee, I think it's purely politics. And as long as they think they can get away with it politically, they want to put him on the bench.
They say get back, we say fight back. But the passion from Kavanaugh's detractors is matched by his Republican backers. They're casting doubt on the allegations themselves and accusing the Democrats of a smear campaign.
Senate Democrats and their allies are trying to destroy a man's personal and professional life on the basis of decades-old allegations that are unsubstantiated and uncorroborated.
Mr. President, do you still support Judge Kavanaugh?
The president, too, is standing by his man.
People that come out of the woodwork from 36 years ago and 30 years ago and never mention it, all of a sudden it happens. In my opinion, it's totally political.
And totally a lie, says Kavanaugh, speaking in that Fox News interview, a rare PR move for a Supreme Court nominee.
I am not questioning and have not questioned that perhaps Dr. Ford at some point in her life was sexually assaulted by someone in some place. But what I know is I've never sexually assaulted anyone.
As the tensions rise on both sides, there are still 2 whole days before Ford and Kavanaugh are set to testify on Capitol Hill, an eternity in D.C. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Washington.
And there's yet another Washington drama set to steal headlines this Thursday. That's when Rod Rosenstein meets with President Trump. The U.S. Deputy Attorney General still has a job, but possibly not for long. Earlier today, a flurry of news reports suggested he was offering to resign or expecting to be fired. And as Paul Hunter explains, the implications of his departure are huge because Rosenstein, after all, is the justice official overseeing that Russia investigation.
Mr. Rosenstein.
Tonight, he's still in his job.
Morning, Mr. Rosenstein. Does anyone ask you to resign?
But Donald Trump's Deputy Attorney General is surely wondering how much longer can it last in an ever-escalating crisis that's gripped the Trump White House almost from the outset. Rosenstein's a key player in the Russia investigation, something Trump derides as a political witch hunt. Bob Mueller, who leads the investigation, answers to Rosenstein, who in turn has firmly stood by Mueller throughout.
Have you seen any evidence of good cause for firing of Special Counsel Mueller?
No, I have not. But last week, the New York Times dropped a stunner, reporting that Rosenstein once proposed secretly recording Trump in the White House, building a case to have him removed from office, something Rosenstein denies.
I'm meeting with Rod Rosenstein on Thursday when I get back from all of these meetings.
Today, Trump ended speculation he was about to fire Rosenstein or that he'd already accepted his resignation, saying the two had an extended phone conversation today, and they'll sit down face-to-face later this week.
And we'll be determining what's going on. We want to have transparency, we want to have openness, and I look forward to meeting with Rod at that time.
What Trump does next represents a high-stakes quandary. Replacing Rosenstein with someone who in turn would get rid of Mueller may seem appealing, but the optics, with those midterm elections looming, could be disastrous. Democrats say it suggests obstruction of justice. Even some Republicans advise, don't even go there.
Well, I think if he did something like that, it would cause a furor that I don't think we need right now.
Tonight, other lawmakers are underlining that. A Democratic senator suggesting even the threat of Trump getting rid of Rosenstein amounts to bullying Bob Mueller, and it represents a direct threat to U.S. democracy. The senator then called on Republicans to stand up to Trump and push back. Adrian.
Okay, Paul, clearly a fair amount of palace intrigue going on here. What have we learned about what was happening behind the scenes?
That confusion and uncertainty hung over all of it all weekend. The New York Times tonight reports that when Rosenstein went to the White House for meetings today, he was certain he was set to be fired the minute he walked in the door, so much so that his aides were even writing up a press release. And, says the Times, that was after a weekend of back and forths between Rosenstein and the White House, in which the White House was evidently trying to figure out whether Rosenstein was even legally allowed to resign if the president wasn't there in person. No one seemed to know. And keep in mind, all of that was happening just as those new allegations about Brett Kavanaugh were starting to come out. Short answer, chaos reigned in that place.
Okay,
again.
It's getting a little hard to keep up with the drama. The CBC's Paul Hunter in Washington. Now to some of the other developing stories we're watching tonight, including Justin Trudeau's appearance at the United Nations.
We'll continue to speak up for the refugees of Rohingya, for the Yazidis of northern Iraq, for the people of Venezuela.
So the Prime Minister kicked off his visit to the UN with a speech that was really championing Canada's commitment to democracy and human rights. Trudeau is campaigning to regain a seat on the Security Council in 2021. And there they are, the protesters and supporters waiting for Bill Cosby on day one of his sentencing hearing. The 81-year-old comedian was convicted in April of sexually assaulting Canadian Andrea Constant. He is now facing a maximum 10 years in prison and could be declared a sexually violent predator. The judge is expected to make a decision on that tomorrow.
Ahead tonight on The National, they were told it would take months to restore power after Hurricane Maria, but that wasn't good enough for a mayor in Puerto Rico. How he took matters into his own hands.
And a little later, can a computer predict where and when and who will commit a crime? We'll take an in-depth look at a controversial technology being used by the LAPD.
First, though, she survived a serial killer. A former patient of Elizabeth Wettlaufer shares her painful story.
I no longer know who I am because Elizabeth Wettlaufer consumes my life. I don't understand why she was bound, bent, and determined to kill me.
It's been more than a year since nurse Elizabeth Wettlaufer pleaded guilty to murdering 8 of her patients and harming 6 others. How her crimes went unnoticed for so long has been the focus of a public inquiry in Ontario. In this final week, the one surviving victim we know of spoke publicly for the first time. John Lancaster has Beverly Bertram's story.
By the time the nurse set her sights on Beverly Bertram, Wettlaufer's lust for harm remained strong, but her targets weren't always the weakest or most vulnerable. Bertram lived at home relying on Wettlaufer for occasional home care until one of those visits left her slipping into a near-fatal insulin overdose.
I no longer know who I am because Elizabeth Wetlaufer consumes my life. I don't understand why she was bound, bent, and determined to kill me.
On top of the 8 patients Wetlaufer did kill, she also tried to kill Bertram and others. Bertram is the only one still alive to talk about it.
I get, oh, she's in jail, don't worry about it, it's over. It's not over. We as the victims are not weak. We need care. And that doesn't mean we don't matter anymore.
The 70-year-old stunned the silent courtroom, pitying the very woman who tried to kill her.
Elizabeth Wetlaufer didn't get respect. I'm not condoning anything she did. But if respect had been given to her as a person, what happened wouldn't have happened. She cried for help many times, and none was given.
And outside the court, her own lawyer, equally humbled.
We've heard a lot of really negative things in there over the past 4 months, and that was such a positive, life-affirming comment from someone who has every reason in the world to be angry and bitter, and it just wasn't there.
Bertram hinted her own health is failing, testifying somewhat reluctantly for those who can no longer be heard.
I just find it very annoying that my life is going to end in this manner. I'm 70 now, and I deserve better.
After speaking publicly for the first time, Bertram returned home quietly, perhaps her burden somewhat lifted. John Lancaster, CBC News, St. Thomas, Ontario.
The families of some of Wetlaufer's other victims spoke today as well, and here's some of that heart-wrenching testimony.
I don't have my father anymore. I miss him. I really miss him a lot. Every goddamn day. It's like the air I breathe, he was everywhere. He'd be here today if it wasn't for the goddamn incompetence of people. Just incompetence, gross incompetence, worrying about what people are going to say about them, worried about getting in trouble, worried about how much it costs. Human life doesn't have a cost, Commissioner.
Since I work in long-term care, I can't go to work without being overwhelmed with the thoughts of my dad and what events led up to his senseless death. I grieve for my mother as well, for she passed away only days after hearing the details of her husband's death in a facility that she trusted, the love of her life with. They were married for over 60 years.
The Commission is now hearing closing submissions from 14 additional groups and organizations. That will take the inquiry to the end of the week. From there, Justice Eileen Galice has 2 years to make recommendations to improve the systemic problems, but these recommendations are not binding. The province not required to make any suggested changes.
Up next on The National, the LAPD's controversial new crime-fighting technique. We'll take an in-depth look at how it's using an algorithm. Is it predictive policing or just profiling?
What effect do you think it would have for you to be put on something like a frequent offender list, or?
I mean, marginalization. It would discourage me from thinking anything higher of myself.
It does all the work for us.
We need to be wary of the mass quantified surveillance of certain populations.
Predictive policing! Shut it down!
I think it's just a continuation and an evolution of racial profiling.
All it takes is a computer algorithm, and police say they can predict where a crime will happen and who will commit it. It's called predictive policing, and the Los Angeles Police Department says it helps it to prevent crime. But as Kim Brunhuber tells us, the community is pretty worried the technology just turns everyone into a suspect.
Before the cuffs.
Code 37, stolen vehicle.
Before the manhunt starts.
Copy. Where you at?
Before the guns are even loaded. This is how it begins. One of the most state-of-the-art police systems originates here, with a stack of paper and a black and green screen.
It's the data that matters and how it's crunched by a multi-million-dollar program to predict crime.
Just any weapon or equipment directly.
Roll call in almost every major police precinct usually sounds a little like this.
A reminder to everyone about finding the dominant aggressor for domestic violence.
But here in one of the busiest police stations in the country, Rampart Division in downtown Los Angeles, you'll also hear something else.
2A17, Howarth and Zizzo. You guys have Predpol?
Predpol is a predictive policing computer program. Zoom in on the desk and you see what it's all about. Those little boxes, they show exactly where the computer predicts crimes will happen in the future. Zones that were drawn up not by a person, but by an algorithm. Here's how it works.
The data that Predpol has for our particular division, Rampart, in 10 boxes we decided.
Captain Jeff Nolte runs the LAPD's Rampart Division.
Can you dial in and show us?
Yeah, absolutely. So this right here is a view on the computer of what is sent to our officers every morning about 1:30 a.m. from Predpol. The officers are given this paper printout. The boxes are 500 square feet, so they are very small. The beauty is that we don't have to have an, somebody working crime analysis looking at all the trends, reading all the reports, suspect information, victim, and developing profiles. It's automatically given to us.
So when you want to put their information in, you fill it all out?
It's a machine learning algorithm
that analyzes several years' worth of crime reports, like these.
The principle? Crime isn't random. It follows a pattern. And if your math is good enough, you can be there when crime happens.
I'm like 2 blocks out.
Or better yet, before.
Should be on the other side of this intersection here.
On this shift, we will spend time in, or touch as the officers say, several of the division's 10 Predpol boxes with Sergeant Dave Rich.
We've reached the first box, a residential neighborhood in the middle of downtown LA.
So it just looks like any other neighborhood?
Correct. Okay, so this area across the street from us right here has been identified as a problem area.
Rampart Division only uses Predpol to analyze property crime. And according to today's report, there's a good chance someone will try to steal something somewhere around here sometime soon.
You're driving through areas where it has been identified as problematic. Sometimes you could just get flagged down. You can turn the corner, you can roll right into a robbery in progress, or there could be some sort of an altercation. All right, so what are we working on? What do we got?
We get a 273.5 from the detectives.
Okay. How long ago did this happen?
For law enforcement agencies, you can see the appeal.
He could be hiding out over there. Okay. Yep.
It makes sense to deploy resources where they're the most likely to do the most good.
Is there any evidence that this actually works?
So that's actually a harder question than you would think.
Vancouver-born sociologist Sarah Brain spent 2 years here inside the LAPD headquarters studying its use of predictive analytics.
I think it's too early to say if it does lead to more effective policing, but I think it has the potential to, yes, because there is the efficiency aspect of it, where if you're allocating resources to where crime is actually occurring rather than sort of biased perceptions of where crime might be occurring, that's a good thing.
But those who worry most about those biased perceptions wonder, can you trust the algorithm if you don't trust the police? Because there's another, even more controversial component to predictive policing. One that can be used to predict not only where crimes will be committed, but also by whom, based on a scoring system. You get 5 points if you're in a gang, on parole, on probation, been arrested with a handgun, or for a violent crime, and 1 point for every time you've been stopped by the police in the last 2 years. Every 3 months, the computer spits out a list of about 20 people, the Chronic Offender Master List. Everyone on that list is sent this letter from the chief of the LAPD urging them to change their ways. With the letter comes a list of community service providers, and at the end, a final wish from the chief. Good luck.
We offer those resources to those folks and give them a way out.
Officers are assigned to check in on these chronic offenders and take any legal opportunity to stop them. We shared a recent chronic offender bulletin with Sarah Brain.
If individuals have these certain points values already, and then officers are encouraged when they're out on patrol to go out, stop, and talk to these individuals to continue gathering intelligence and further increase their point score, thus justifying their continued stopping day after day, it essentially turns into this cycle where it's impossible to escape.
You want everything?
That's why in some communities there's a growing fear. If the information fed into the computer models is biased, then the police data could become almost as dangerous as their guns. Baldwin Village, better known as the Jungle. According to LAPD statistics, it's one of the most crime-ridden areas in the city. For years, to help crack down on gangs, the LAPD has relied on official lists of known and suspected gang members.
You're on that list.
Yes.
Yeah, so what effect do you think it would have for you to be put on something like a frequent offender list, or?
I mean, marginalization. It would discourage me from thinking anything higher of myself. Like,
in the Jungle, we met up with several people who ended up on those gang lists, even though they say they weren't and never have been gang members, like Anthony Robles. Growing up, he wondered why police always seemed to be stopping him whenever they saw him on the streets.
One time they put me in the back of a police car, and as they're running my name in their little computer in the car, I'm watching them as they're doing it, and my file comes up. I seen it said gang associate, tagging crew, affiliate or something like that, and I was like, wow, so this is why they're always harassing me, because they think I'm part of a gang.
Now, some community groups are fighting back.
So it's when you get stopped by an officer, he takes down your name, what you look like.
Based in an area called Skid Row, the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition was founded to oppose police suppression and intelligence gathering.
So who is Predpol going to target? We already know. Operation Laser.
Now, volunteer Jamie Garcia is trying to warn the local community about the dangers of predictive policing.
By driving algorithms and risk assessments with data, that somehow policing is becoming more effective, efficient, and fair. And I think that's really problematic because it's trying to mask policing how it's always historically been, which is impacting the Black and brown communities.
Look closely at this list. Almost everyone on it is a minority.
The suspects are probably going to look like the population. If you're taking the position that minorities are paranoid that Predpol is going to put a bunch of officers in one area in a box, you know, I would argue that's part of what we should do. We have some information that we think this place is at risk, we should go there. But we shouldn't just use enforcement and suppression.
Essentially right now, all of the new surveillance technologies and tools that can collect data on all of us, not just people who have direct police contact, that technology is moving so much faster than the laws and regulations to govern that activity. And so as such, it's kind of this like legal and regulatory Wild West.
You think that eventually we'll see these types of tools be used in Canada?
I think that we will, but I think in this instance, actually Canada being a little bit behind the U.S. in certain ways might be a benefit rather than a drawback.
53 in route to female with mental illness in Rampart.
Back on the beat in yet another Predpol box, an arrest for robbery.
1240, Roger. Broke into the apartment complex and stole a car. Started showing me all this.
Supporters of predictive policing hope that one day it will prevent thefts like this.
It's all for fighting. Every single time you've been in jail, it's fighting.
Activists fear that, if left unchecked, eventually we might all have our own police file, our own score. Kim Brunhuber, CBC News, Los Angeles.
Now, Canadian police are aware of the tools being used by the U.S. because police share best practices across the border all the time. The Vancouver police are perhaps closest to what the LAPD are doing. Vancouver uses the technology to predict property crimes. In Saskatoon, police use similar algorithms to identify youth at risk, hoping that by identifying them, then helping the young people will be a different kind of crime prevention. No one in Canada is doing anything to the same extent as LA, but that could be coming.
Up next on The National, Joanna Remiliotis takes us back to Puerto Rico, to a small town where people took matters into their own hands in the wake of Hurricane Maria.
The mayor said that if you guys help them out, we're gonna have electricity in 2 days. And I said, what? Let's go, what we gotta do? And I had a meeting like in 15 minutes, the whole neighborhood was here, the whole community.
First, though, a preview of a story you'll see here tomorrow night on The National. Diana Swain gives us a rare inside look at a special court in Nova Scotia. Take a look at this.
All rise.
What happens in this room carries the same legal weight as a regular court, but that's about where the similarity ends.
Good afternoon.
You don't typically see artwork on the walls donated by those who've appeared in court. And note that slogan over the judge's head, letting people know that just because you have a past does not mean you have no future.
We have not done a particularly great job in the traditional system with some folks that have severe mental illness. They find themselves returning to regular court more often, not coming to court more often, being arrested more often, being in jail more often.
Tonight on The National, the RCMP's first female commissioner has been named one of 2 new senators. Beverly Busson will represent BC in the Red Chamber. She joined the force in the mid-70s when policing was still very much a man's job, and she rose through the ranks, eventually becoming the top Mountie in 2006. Also named to the upper house, Marty Klein, a prominent Saskatchewan businessman of Cree Métis heritage. And the search for 2 fishermen off the west coast of PEI has come to a tragic conclusion. The body of Mo Getson was found on a beach this morning about 45 kilometers south of where the fishing vessel went down last Tuesday. The body of the ship's captain, Glenn DeRoche, was recovered yesterday morning. The pair worked together for about 10 years. A 3rd crew member was able to swim to safety after the accident.
To Puerto Rico now, where the island is still rebuilding 1 year after Hurricane Maria hit. The destructive storm left millions in the dark for months, some for almost a year. And repairing the already outdated power grid was no easy task. But as Joanna Remiliotis discovered, one small community refused to wait on officials to restore electricity. Instead, they decided to take power into their own hands.
All these trees, they're high, so we just chop them down.
Carlos Santiago was a man with a machete and a mission, and he wasn't the only one.
We just chop down all the trees and make a path, sort of a road, so we could go back and forth and get the wires pulled out and then get the wires installed again.
How long did that take?
With the energy we had, that we wanted energy.
You were motivated.
We were so motivated, it took us maybe a day.
A day?
A day, but it was like 9, 10 of us. Everybody had a machete. They said, what I got to do? You got to do this. Once you take that section there, I'll take this section here. And then we just started going uphill, chopping everything down. And,
if Carlos sounds like he went rogue, he did. So did his neighbors after they got an extraordinary call from the mayor of San Sebastian.
He says, if you get me people to work, the community involved, to work together, I'll have electricity for you in 2 days. I said, what? I feel like crying. It was so stunning. And I said, in 2 days? We have gone through hell. And I got through the community. I said, hey guys, the mayor said that if you guys help them out, we're gonna have electricity in 2 days. And they said, what? Let's go. What we gotta do? And I had a meeting like in 15 minutes. The whole neighborhood was here, the whole community.
It was weeks after the hurricane. The entire island was still in darkness, and the forecast from PREPA, the public utility, was bleak. At least 6 more months to restore power.
These are my main equipment.
That's when the mayor did something no one in Puerto Rico had done before. He took power into his own hands.
It was my responsibility to do that. And when you have a responsibility, you have to do it.
Javier Jimenez created the town's own power utility, called it the Pepino Power Authority, after San Sebastian's nickname.
Who was it made up of?
The Pepino Power is a movement of San Sebastian. We create, our employees, we ask retirement employees from PREPA, and we include, when we was in the community, the people who live in this community. The people stand up and take control of his destiny.
The town documented every step of it in daily video updates as a group of vigilante line workers reconnected the town to the grid themselves. But as word spread, so did resistance.
PREPA, the state utility, and the government of Puerto Rico filed complaints and ordered the amateur utility to stop work.
And did you?
No, we continue.
You continue.
I don't care if what they say. I have to do something for my people. No one can stop us to do my duty. It's my duty to help my people.
So into the bush they went, led by retired PREPA worker Gilbert Soto, who goes by Gifo.
What were you trying to get to?
Gifo shows us where he led a team of volunteers to clear a path.
You were trying to get to the power lines?
Yeah. You see?
Yes.
To another side.
And they had all the power things had fallen.
Yeah.
The poles. So you have to go through all this thick, all these trees. You have to cut.
All of tree, like this. Look at this, like this. All
Wow. That must,
like this.
That's hard work.
Yeah, a lot of work.
And in the heat.
Yeah.
Wow.
Gifo and his core team, all retired utility workers, did the actual repairs using spare and donated parts. See those coiled sections on the line? That's where they tied the torn cables together by hand.
I am
You are religious?
My religions and my personal
belief.
I have to service the community. I have to do something.
That something amounted to a lot. 3 months after the hurricane, 92% of San Sebastian had power, months before most of the island.
My wife started running towards the house, signaling, hey, look, there's light. And everybody, we started clapping, and we were so happy. And then we came on up the block, everybody started turning on their lights. And myself, and then they turned on that transformer. There's like 3 or 4 transformers, and then the whole neighborhood had electricity. It was amazing, really amazing.
Because of that success, Puerto Rico recently made it legal for other towns to create their own utilities in the event of an emergency. The legacy of a renegade mayor who didn't wait for permission.
If other hurricane come to Puerto Rico or other kind of emergency come to Puerto Rico, we are ready. We are ready.
Joanna Remiliotis, CBC News, San Sebastian, Puerto Rico.
The Moment is up next. First, though, a story of survival. Aldi Novel Adilang is back home with his family in Indonesia after spending 49 days lost at sea.
Slowly, slowly.
The 18-year-old was pretty weak as he climbed aboard, relying on his rescuers to help him stand. Adilang said he ran out of food and water the very first week, so he ate what he could catch and drank the seawater squeezed from his clothes. Now, this was the wooden raft where he was stranded. It's called a rompong, and Adilang has been working on rompong since he was 16. His job was to light the lamps at night to attract fish. Rompongs line the coast of Manado, and when strong winds knocked Adilangs free, he drifted, get this, nearly 2,000 kilometers before he was finally spotted near Guam. So he's now been reunited with his family. Apparently he's in pretty good health. And while his family is overjoyed he's back, there's a catch. His dad is furious with his son's boss because this is the 3rd time Adilang's raft has drifted into open ocean.
Over the past few days, we've been bringing you stories of people who survived the Ottawa tornadoes, people who lost so much and yet are still thinking of others, including Paralympian Todd Nicholson and his family. Their Dunrobin home was destroyed, but still they're grateful, thankful for the work of first responders, and their resilience is our moment of the day.
We are in 1 bedroom, all 4 of us, but we have a home away from home. We came here for the first emergency meeting on Saturday morning, and we left where we were staying that night. They're good friends of ours, and we came back. And 2 hours later. And they had made a ramp, already handmade ramp to get in their front door.
I think the message we also need to get out today is I know there's still a lot of people that are out of power. And I know there's the hydro workers they're exhausted. Yesterday when we were coming out, there was a hydro truck sitting there, and We looked at the gentleman sitting inside and bawled his eyes out. And he goes, I didn't lose anything. And I said, don't worry about it. We lost everything, but we're okay. So, and he's like, we need to get power back on to people. And I was like, no, you don't. You need to go get some rest. Get some sleep, get yourself better, and then come back, and so that you don't get hurt doing what you do.
It's just also raw. You know, Todd and Emily are saying that some of their neighbors are telling them that they keep finding stuff of theirs all over the place, and they're all, as a community, gathering it together, bringing Todd and Emily's stuff to a certain location. People are rushing to do it because they know the rains are coming. And again, these communities just keep reaching out to each other.
Yeah, and they would be the first to say, and we got a sense of it in that clip there, and I've seen it in some of the other material we have, they'd be the first to say, you know, we have survived, we are healthy, although some people obviously were injured in the tornado, but it could have been so much worse, but it's still pretty bad. And as you say, looked at the forecast and the rains are on their way. Well, thank you very much for watching. That is The National for September 24th.
Good night.
Good night.